Okay, everyone. So this is the second meeting of our TLE class. In the second meeting, I would like to introduce about the introduction to language test. If we talk about language test, it means that there are two kinds of language tests. First is the skills language test, and the second one is the language component test. But actually, in our teaching and learning activities at school, English has to be mastered as the skills of language. So the language components can be measured integratedly while testing the language skills. Okay, language is something that is complex and has many dimensions. Efforts to study and analyze language are concerned with many different aspects. Moreover, the language analysis results can also vary depending on the prioritized aspects, along with the efforts to assess the level of mastery of language skills. Assessment of language skills cannot be separated from the prioritized language aspect. Okay, first we discuss about tests of language skills. With language skills tests, information can be obtained about the ability to use language at a particular stage by the types of abilities covered in overall language skills. Language proficiency tests can be in the form of listening skills tests, reading skills tests, speaking skills tests, and writing skills tests. Like what I have mentioned previously, the indicators of communicating the language fluently is that we have already mastered the four language skills. What are they? Yeah, listening skills, reading, speaking, and writing skills. Okay, first listening test. As with other language tests, listening tests need to be structured, considering the rules and requirements for a good test. A listening test is held by listening to a spoken text as test material. The spoken text can be uttered directly by a native speaker of the language or simply through recording audio. After the spoken text is delivered, some questions must be answered. So this is the common way of conducting listening tests. Next, reading test. What is reading test? Measurement or development of reading skills questions should support the communicative function of language, primarily written language. The measurement can be in the form of short questions and answers about the text, answering reading questions, re-expressing the understanding of the content of the discourse orally, and for re-expressing the contents of the discourse in writing. The primary purpose of holding a reading test is to find out and measure the level ability to understand reading materials. The reading ability level reflects the level of understanding of the content of the reading. In the reading test, the discourse phase is in the form of the discourse delivered through written media. So the main objective of the reading test is to measure whether our students could comprehend the reading test. The indicators that shows the level of comprehension is that the students are able to answer all of the questions related to the reading text. The questions are related to the skills of reading. That is, the questions related to scanning, test, reading item, making inference, skimming, drawing conclusion, and determine topic or determine main ideas. Next, speaking test. What is speaking test? Speaking is the ability to express articulation, sounds, or words to say, state, and convey thoughts, ideas, or feelings. Speaking test target includes the relevance and clarity of the message, neatness of the content organization, and the use of sound and correct language following the content, the purpose of the discourse, the actual situation, and the listener. Conducting a controlled speaking test can take the form of telling a picture or retelling a story that has been conveyed previously orally or in writing. In the implementation of the free speaking test, test takers are given the freedom to determine the problems they want to talk about. So controlled means that we have already determined what our students have to deliver. But in the free form of speaking test, the students are free to choose their own topic to deliver. Okay, next is writing test. In expressing ideas in writing, language user has more opportunities to prepare and organize themselves, both in terms of what they want to communicate and how to describe it. Messages that need to be disclosed can be carefully selected and arranged systematically so that when they are described in writing, they are easily understood correctly. Likewise, the choice of words and their arrangement in the form of discourse can be done by following the appropriate, reasonable, and correct language rules. So this is the indicators of how to write properly. Okay, and this is the way to administer the writing test. So writing test can be administered on a limited basis and freely. The test taker's writing is carried out with certain limitations in the first writing test. The limit can be in the form of predetermined title, the time and length of the writing, and the language style used. On the other hand, in the free writing test, participants can decide for themselves what to write and how to compose their writing with minimally defined signs. Okay, so my explanations here is related to language skills test. And next, I'm going to present about test of language component or language aspects. Okay, now we go on to how to test language components. Language components comprise of three aspects or three components. That is language sound, language vocabulary, and language grammar. First is test of language sound. In teaching foreign languages, mastery of language sounds is one of the vital teaching goals. The target of the language sound test for them generally includes knowledge of the entire sound system of the language, both in the form of recognizing and understanding language sounds passively, receptively, as well as in the form of pronouncing and using language sounds actively, productively. It means that the test of language sound component here is integrated in the listening test. Yeah, listening test, it means that in the listening test, students are required, yeah, to recognize recognize the language sound passively or receptively. So that's why listening refers to receptive skills. Meanwhile, the language sounds component also is measured in speaking tests in the form of pronouncing and using language sounds actively, productively. So that's why speaking test refers to skills refers to productive skills. The sounds of language are in the form of consonants and vowels. The complete sound system of the language includes the high and low voice, word and sentence stress, sentence songs or intonation, and so on. The level mastery of the parts of the sound system of the language is the target of language tests, especially the language sound test. Next, vocabulary test. As part of the language component, vocabulary consists of words used in the communication through language, both spoken and written. In communication through language, vocabulary is an essential element. The meaning of discourse is primarily determined by the vocabulary used in its expression. So vocabulary test is one of the language components which are measured both in the spoken and written language skills. So spoken skills refers to listening and speaking. Written language refers to writing and reading. Vocabulary tests are mainly concerned with mastering the meaning of words and the ability to use them in the proper context and in the right place in discourse. As part of language acquisition, vocabulary mastery consists of active productive knowledge and passive receptive ability. Active productive knowledge refers to speaking and writing. Passive receptive ability refers to listening and reading. Vocabulary that is part of active productive mastery is often known as active vocabulary, namely vocabulary that a language user can use natural and without much difficulty in expressing himself. Conversely, with passive vocabulary, which is part of passive receptive mastery, a language user can only use it to understand other people's language expressions without using it naturally in his own expressions. The last language component test refers to grammar test. As a language component, grammar is related to the arrangement of words in a series. In addition to the structure of words in a series of talks, grammar relates to changes in the word form, which sometimes occur due to the arrangement of words in phrases or sentences. The objectives of the grammar test broadly include understanding and using the formation of words, phrases, and sentences. Tests that can be developed for performance and using the construction of words and phrases can be used on one or more test formats. It depends on various things such as test purpose, material that needs to be covered, the time available to prepare and work on it, or the administrator's ability. Grammar tests can be in the form of essay tests, multiple choice tests, completion tests, short answer tests, and so on. But in the school, grammar test usually as the main component in measuring students' writing ability and student speaking ability. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you very much. See you. Okay, in the next part, we will discuss about objective and subjective tests. What is an objective test? Objective tests are often also called dichotomously scored items because the answer is either true or false and the score is between 1 and 0. So if you answer the question correctly, you got the point 1. But if you answer incorrectly, you only got 0. The objective test consists of several forms. First is true-false question. The form of true-false question is a statement that contains two possible answers, namely true or false. One of the functions of true-false questions is to measure the ability of students to distinguish between facts and opinions. This question is more widely used to measure the ability to identify information based on superficial relationships. There are several techniques or practical instruction in preparing true-false to form questions. First, the number of correct and incorrect items should be the same. Second, give instructions on how to do straightforward questions and use simple sentences. And the last, the number of items should be large enough so that they can be accounted for. In language testing, the format of true-false questions can be given when we want to give the reading test. Next, multiple choice. The multiple choice test question measures learning outcomes that are more complex and related to aspects of memory, understanding, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. The answer choices or options consist of the correct or most correct answer, which from now on is referred to as the answer key. And the possible wrong answer is called the distractor. Some practical guidelines in preparing multiple choice questions are: first, must refer to essential competencies and question indicators. Second, do not include question material that is not relevant to what students have learned. Third, statements and choices should be unbroken sentences. Fourth, there must be only one correct answer. And the last, if necessary, give a distracting answer. So the form of multiple choice question can be used for testing, reading, or listening. Next, matching test. Matching test questions consist of a collection of questions and a group of answers, both of which are collected in two different columns. The left column shows an array of questions, and the right column shows a group of answers. This form of question is perfect for measuring the ability of students to identify the relationship between two things. So matching tests can be given to reading test takers and listening test takers, or grammar, vocabulary, or sound. So language component tests. In order to design the matching test, you have to pay attention to the following techniques. First, adjust it to the essential competencies and indicators. Second, the questions are on the left and the answers are on the right. And the last, use short sentences and focus on the subject. The next form of objective test is completion. Completion questions are offered in incomplete sentences. The following are some technical criteria for constructing questions in the form of completion. First, should not take straight quotes from the book or textbook. Next, dots serving as answer spaces. Third, do not supply an excessive number of blanks. Fourth, if necessary, images can be provided so they can be condensed and made apparent. The next form of test besides objective is subjective test. What is subjective test? In general, a subjective exam or test consists of questions that require students to respond in the form of describing, explaining, discussing, comparing, and other similar forms, utilizing words and language itself in line with the requirements of the question. Then, the necessary testing the capacity of students to generalize their thoughts through written language, such that the kind of inquiries is more subjectively based. The amount of questions on a subjective form is often small, ranging from 5 to 10 items between 90 to 120 minutes. The questions on this form demand students to be able to organize, understand, and link previously acquired concepts. As in an essay examination, test takers must consider what to say and then communicate their thoughts as effectively as feasible. Subjective test form in language testing can be used for testing speaking and writing. Okay, that's all for my explanations. Thank you.